Good evening, welcome, and thank you for joining us for Conservation Conversations presented by the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources. My name's Kevin Kelly, and I'm joined again tonight by my co-host, Gabe Jenkins. Gabe, it's good to see you tonight. How are you?
I'm doing well, Kevin. You as well. I'm looking forward to tonight and our conversations.
Absolutely. So we're in a little bit different surroundings tonight, obviously because of the ice storm that we had last night that's affected parts of the state. And I hope all those who are watching this evening, hope you and your loved ones are safe and you're doing well. We've got a lot of ground to cover tonight, so we're going to get right to it. Gabe, who do we have joining us tonight?
So first off, we'll have two Wildlife Division employees with us today, Dr. Chrissy Casey and Terry Brunges. They're both with the Wildlife Division, and we're looking forward to our conversations with them. And if we can have them join us, and we'll introduce them and let them talk about themselves. So Terry, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind, please.
Thanks for having me, guys. Well, I've been a wildlife biologist with the department for 15 years now. Started out as a farm bill biologist, working to conserve wildlife habitat. I did that for 9 years. And now for about the last 5 years, I have worked as the wild pig biologist, working on eradication efforts throughout the state.
Awesome. Thank you for having us. And Dr. Casey, thank you.
Hey. Yeah, so I'm Dr. Casey. I'm pretty new here. I started in July of 2019. I'm moved here from Georgia, where I'd lived there for 10 years. I went to school at the University of Georgia. Stayed for a while, did lots of degrees. That's where I got a master's in veterinary biomedical sciences, which was a wildlife disease background. And then I went to school and got my doctorate of veterinary medicine. I also got a master's in public health, which really gave me a big background in infectious disease epidemiology, which you will hear all about shortly. Right. But really, and as you can tell, I do not sound like I'm from Georgia. I'm originally from Vermont. So I started at the top of the Appalachian Mountains, went all the way down to the bottom, and now I'm right here in the middle in Appalachia, and I love it.
Excellent.
You're used to this weather then, right?
That is
or can
true.
you get used to it?
I think my blood thinned a little bit. I appreciate the warm weather of the South. That's for sure.
Well, I'll say thank you for being on tonight and being accommodating with us, even in all the ice and the cold. So really appreciate you all being here and enjoying our conversations. So for our listeners and our viewers, just one thing to remember, that we will be taking questions. So please ask your questions in the chat, and we'll try to get them to the end of the episode. As we go along, we'll be doing questions and answers and discussing a variety of topics. But as our watchers are listening, if you have something specific that you want to ask, by all means do that, and we'll try to get to you towards the end of the episode.
So we've got, like I said before, we got a lot of ground to cover, and Chrissy, we're gonna kick things off with you. Our presentation tonight for the viewers is about threats facing fish and wildlife, disease and non-native or invasive species. So you touched on your background, your educational background, and just how that qualifies you, to have this job as the state wildlife veterinarian. Some people may be curious, what does a state wildlife veterinarian do, and just how important is it for you to track and monitor disease among fish and wildlife populations? So maybe if we can just start there, be a good kind of jumping off point for us tonight.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Kevin. Essentially, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what a state wildlife veterinarian actually does. I think a lot of people think I cuddle with wildlife and that I'm saving individual animals, which it's actually quite the opposite. I deal a lot more, unfortunately, with dead animals and trying to figure out why they died, because it's really more about population medicine rather than individual medicine. So like a traditional veterinarian at your small animal practice, they're a clinician. They're going to treat that individual just like a doctor, like an MD would do. But in the realm of like a state wildlife vet, it's more like epidemiology in the sense that we're dealing with populations and population medicine and how best to manage a population and keep them healthy. So my job really is to protect and conserve the health and welfare of Kentucky's wildlife.
Excellent. That's, one thing I want to say right before we get started, we deal with, and you specifically deal with a lot of different diseases. And, we're going to cover a lot of ground, different topics, different species. And what we really want to tell folks is that we want you to rest assured that we're doing our part as an agency to monitor the species, to manage them correctly, and not to be afraid of the things that we're talking about. Every animal has a disease or disease concern that we look at. Some of them are prevalent, some of them are not. Some of them are more widespread, and some of them are very isolated. So, just be rest assured that we as the department do our very best, and that's why we have you on staff and your abilities to collaborate with folks. And so a lot of great things, a lot of very interesting things that we do. And I think our viewers are going to be really astounded of all the different things that you specifically work on.
Yeah, it's true. I do cover a lot of bases, and I'm going to go into great detail about them. And, I wouldn't be able to do it without the help of others. Like, it is all about collaboration. I think you mentioned that. And as I go through this, I'll try to talk about some of the partners that we work with, because really it's not just one person. It's not just me in the division. There's multiple people across the division. There's people outside the division. There's different agencies, state and federal. And then we have nonprofit organizations. There's so many people that really control wildlife health.
So let's, I was going to say, let's build a foundation first. So let's talk about disease and what that looks like, just in broad categories, and then we'll move through things. So why does disease occur? Explain some terminology that you might hear to kind of get our viewers up to speed.
Certainly. And I think I'm going to share a little presentation that I put together. That way people have pictures to look at while I talk. So let me see if I can do this real quick for you. Let's see. Are you seeing wildlife health and veterinary epidemiology? Yep. Perfect. Let me just get my other screen situated. So really, to start off, we should start with disease and what that means. I think, a lot of people just assume that disease is this very simple thing that's static, which is it's not. At the bare bones, the definition is the presence and the replication, which is very important, of a microorganism and the accompanying immune response that disrupts normal physiology. I bring that up because disease should be thought of as like an iceberg. So you really, like clinical disease, which is that overt clinical signs, it's the tip. And there's actually quite a bit of disease that we don't see underneath the surface, which is the subclinical disease, which is infection without clinical illness, often referred to as an asymptomatic infection.
So when you say clinical, that means that animal is showing the symptoms, right? And then if
exactly, there's some type of sign that I know that the normal physiology is disrupted. So you have disease and the normal physiology is disrupted, but it's subclinical. Like, you're not going to actually see overt signs of it. And I do want to put it out there. So I'll mention pathogens a lot, and just to get everybody on the same page. Pathogens is a broad term for infectious organisms, which could be bacteria, it could be viruses, parasites, or fungi. And prions have an asterisk next to it because they're not a microorganism, they're a misfolded protein. They're crazy in their own little world. And that we'll just leave it at that for now. Let's see, what should we talk about next?
All right, so we kind of got the basics of what a disease is. Let's talk about surveillance and monitoring, what that looks like in terminology and how you do those.
Certainly. I want to mention why disease is important. Intrinsically to an animal, like just because a disease impacts them, it's important. Some people agree with that. Conservation is another reason. We want to conserve populations, and disease can have impacts on them. Maintaining biodiversity is a key thing. I think a lot of people pass over that. Diversity is really like the insurance kind of nature. The more diverse things are, the more they're able to resist catastrophic change, which could happen from a disease or a natural disaster. And then One Health. One Health is a big one. That means that all of our healths are interconnected. The environment, animal health, and human health are interconnected. So we should care about how animals are doing because they can spill over into humans or they compromise food safety. So there's a whole bunch of reasons we should care. And of course, money. Money is always important.
Right.
And that's a big one. But yeah, getting into why does disease occur? This is that idea that disease really isn't simple and it's not static. It's very dynamic, and it has three principal factors that it looks really simple in the sense that like it requires a host, it requires a pathogen, and it requires favorable conditions in the environment. I mean, if you don't have a pathogen, you don't have the disease. But like really, this is the like core principle behind you manage disease. Like you put interventions here, like to break the pathogen getting to the host or to keep the pathogen out of the environment. So this is where a lot of interventions are made, is breaking this triangle apart to prevent disease. Let's see, what else do I want to? Another key component, and this is something, with COVID around, I'm sure you guys have all heard about epidemics, but the idea is that some diseases occur naturally, own frequencies, and that's kind of this endemic state. We expect certain diseases to be present on the landscape, and they occur at a general frequency. We're just aware that they're there and they're not going to go away. Epidemics are the ones that really are the concerning ones because they cause these peaks, and that's what we're having is an epidemic of COVID, which actually on a global scale is called a pandemic. So that's just some epi terms there. And I bring this up because it's important to distinguish between these two circumstances for effectively allocating our limited state resources in terms of making sure we're testing and investigating and monitoring disease outbreaks. So that's really important that we kind of understand where these are. And this all feeds into our surveillance, which is a lot of what I do is surveillance. Let's see if I can make this go forward. So surveillance and monitoring. Essentially, you can have passive, which is just general opportunistic sampling of wildlife, looking to see what's there. And then there's active, which is like a targeted and you're focused on one pathogen or one species, or what you're looking for. And chronic wasting disease is a great example because we have a statewide surveillance program for this.
Right.
And passive is when we're testing roadkill or we're testing sick and dead animals. And then active would be going out, we're actively collecting samples from hunter harvested animals. So that's kind of the difference in types of surveillance systems that different states use and how you manage wildlife.
Okay. I think you've given us a pretty broad background of kind of where we are, what the different terminologies we use and we understand. You mentioned COVID, that's our life right now, everything we deal with and how things look. But so let's bring that home into wildlife. Let's talk about COVID and wildlife, animals that we have, in the wild that we're concerned about, and what we're doing as an agency in your collaboration with public health. And you talked about One Health. So kind of bring it into picture the real life scenario right now with COVID for us.
Certainly. So COVID-19 and wildlife. So I actually, just as a background with collaborators, I attend CDC partners meetings. We have them on once a week. And basically it includes federal partners and state partners. It includes people from public health. It includes people from ag. It includes people from the food safety industry. And then it includes us wildlife folk, because it is all interconnected in this One Health world. And there's a couple things I just wanted to start off with, because you're going to hear me say them. And so I want to make sure it's clear. When we talk SARS-CoV-2, that is the actual name of the virus, and COVID-19 is the name of the disease. Just so we're clear, if you're like, why are these interchangeable?
That tripped me up, Chrissy, when COVID first hit the scene.
Yes.
You were in talking to you and kind of thinking about, okay, COVID-19 and wildlife and SARS and CoV-2 and versus what we hear just as COVID-19. So kind of you make an important distinction here about the way you think about it and the way we hear about it.
Yep.
And definitely, and as scientists in the scientific community, we're referring to it as SARS-CoV-2, which stands for, because it's related to a disease that outbreak. It was a while ago, but it was SARS. And so SARS-CoV-2 is the other virus. So the original SARS is SARS-CoV, and this one's SARS-CoV-2. So and that's important because not all coronaviruses are alike. And I say that because, there are coronaviruses that infect a wide variety of species. The coronavirus that's in your cat is not the same coronavirus that we're getting. The coronavirus that's in poultry is not the same coronavirus we're getting. There are hundreds of coronaviruses. And specifically, what I put in here was that it's a massive family. And it's RNA. I bring that up, I know nobody wants to harken back to biology, but if you remember, there's DNA and there's RNA. And RNA, it tends to mutate faster because of how things are translated in cellular mechanics. There tends to be more mutations. So that is something we expected, that there were going to be mutations with coronaviruses. They really, generally speaking, coronaviruses tend to be very host specific. That's why I was mentioning the cats and the birds. I mean, they usually are very host specific, except for this one group, which happened to be the beta coronaviruses, which is where COVID-19 falls. And they tend to have a wide host range. And when I say wide, I mean wide. Like currently, our big ones that everybody's heard about are the cases, the cats in the zoos. Remember, it started with the Bronx Zoo. I mean, Louisville Zoo had a snow leopard, and then there were some tigers down in the Knox Zoo. Most recently, some gorillas, which are not cats, obviously, but they're related to us humans. So primates are also susceptible. Another one which people may have heard about are mink. The whole Mustelidae family, so those are the weasels, seem to be susceptible. And not only that, they seem to be able to transmit to each other. I'm going to share a slide on the next one that is from a CDC meeting where we were talking about mink. And just to give you a heads up, mink in Utah is the first detection of wild mink being positive with SARS-CoV-2. And that was a spillover event from a domestic farmed facility. And so it is possible for mink to transmit to other mink and for mink to transmit to other animals. But we don't have any mink farms in Kentucky. In other states that do, they are doing active surveillance around those mink farms. So when I said active, I mean, they're going out there and they're physically testing different wildlife that are found around the vicinity. And back to that wide host range, I mean, you know that some rodents seem to be susceptible. So they tested in hamsters, rabbits, deer mice. Dogs are like the iffy world. So dogs don't generally show signs. And the few cases that have happened were because they were in very close proximity to a sick human. Like one case, there was a dog who was drinking out of the toilet bowl from a sick human, which, if you know, coronavirus is shed in your feces and urine. So that's why it ended up in the toilet bowl. So dogs really aren't a huge concern, but yes, they are susceptible. So yeah, we're really still exploring this world. And I mean, I would recommend this not to talk about the bats. In the world of bats, because we know that this virus likely spilled over from old world bats. And that's what the picture is on here. So old world bats are these flying foxes. They are native to Southeast Asia, the Indo region over there. Don't have any up here in the United States, but there is concern because it's a bat species. Like, we don't want it to get into our bats. And they did do a study. The National Wildlife Health Center did do a study, and they showed that big brown bats are not susceptible, which is good news for big browns. Unfortunately, it wasn't a Myotis species, which are the ones like Indiana's, little brown, tricolors, ones that are heavily impacted by white nose. We don't know if they're susceptible. And so we don't want to jump to conclusions that they're not just because one bat isn't, because they're so vulnerable and so important for ecosystems in terms of like pollination, insect control. Bats are still, we're being very cautious, like in terms of like we're still not recommending rehabbers take them in at all. So that's a big thing we're trying to prevent is exposing our native bats to this virus because we just don't know.
So Chrissy, I was going to say, we've talked, COVID-19 and wildlife and different things. One thing that I want to make sure that we get out, and we'll say this multiple times, is that if you've got an animal that's sick and you think it's because, if you've experienced COVID or know somebody or any other animal, the biggest and the best thing for you to do and our watchers is to what? What would you prefer them to do if they find a sick animal that's a wild animal?
I would prefer them not to touch it and to give us a call. There's just so many other diseases out there that it could possibly be that humans can get. And so from a safety standpoint, it's much better to report a sick animal than to try to handle it. Not only because handling blood usually doesn't go well, right. Especially if they're not sedated. So reporting is really the best way. If you see a sick animal, giving us a call, and we can kind of go over that scenario and figure out whether this is something that warrants additional diagnostics.
So, the biggest thing I think for our folks, if you're listening, call our 1-800, which is 1-800-858-1549, or you can send us an email, contact us through our website at fw.ky.gov. If you want to get super specific, there's also an opportunity that you can go and you can find your county contact. It's right on our webpage where it's a button that says county contact. You select that. You select the county that you live or the county that you see the animal that's misbehaving oddly, and you can find all the different staff that are there and reach out to them directly. So please, by all means, and we're going to say this over and over tonight, if you see a sick animal and it doesn't behave normal, call us. Let us know about it. Yes,
definitely. I would reiterate that 100 times over. And so like I was saying, I'll briefly mention the mink again because it's most relevant right now in terms of COVID and wildlife because they seem to be the most susceptible. Obviously, SARS is primarily transmitted human to human. At these mink farms, not in the United States, but they have demonstrated in Europe that the mink were able to transmit to humans. There was a variant that was a mink variant. However, it has not been detected in a while. So we believe that cluster has died out. But what I was talking about before with this active surveillance around mink farms has to do with the fact that mink do appear to be able to transmit to other mink and other animals. There was a cat that has recently tested, I believe this one was in Wisconsin, that tested positive around a captive facility. So again, there's ongoing research with COVID and wildlife. We're still just really scratching the surface of who's susceptible, what does this really mean from a population level, because just because you can get the disease doesn't mean you can transmit it to other animals. So that's a big point. We're learning, we're learning as we go.
Right.
And try to be as safe as we can along the way.
So we obviously COVID is fresh in our minds and it's impacted our lives in many ways. There is more information on our website about COVID-19 and wildlife. Chrissy was kind enough to do a video a while ago, so feel free to check that out. But we're gonna we want to explore some other areas, non-game species, birds and small game. What are we seeing? What diseases are you looking into for different species?
Certainly, which is interesting because the next one I'm going to talk about might actually be a consequence of people staying home and watching wildlife and feeding them. So most recently, we're experiencing an ongoing outbreak of salmonella in bird feeders. And this is due to really hygiene. So an infected bird comes to your feeder and they defecate in the feeder. It gets over the seed, and then the bacteria spreads to other birds. So really, currently we've confirmed salmonella in 2 counties. It's in Washington County and Callaway. So that's across the state. And I've submitted another bird from Jefferson. And so, if you're seeing dead birds at your feeder, you're more, like I said, call. We can always send some off for testing. I prefer to have 2 or 3. That way, if one doesn't test positive, that's just a diagnostic thing. But really here, the key is if you are seeing dead birds, you just take down your feeders and you need to clean them. Cleaning your feeders is like, it should be done every 2 weeks anyways, with like a 5 to 10% bleach solution. If you're seeing dead birds, you should be taking your feeders down and waiting 2 weeks and cleaning them before you put them back up.
So I know, like for me, this is me right now. My kids are home. I'm a good wildlife biologist. I'm trained, so I want to teach my kids bird ID. So that's what we've been doing every day is I got it right out the window, different species that come in. So that's part of the conversation that I'm having with them is they know it's also important that we clean it. It's just like the reason we clean our dishes and our forks and our knives is, they need to have a healthy place to eat as well. So, I mean, is there anything else besides bleach that you need to do? Treat the seed, anything like that? Just bleach it and that's good?
No, you should dump the seed, obviously. Like, so if the seed that you used, you should get rid of it and start with fresh seed, like seed from the bag that hasn't been contaminated, because this is a fecal oral route transmission of a bacteria. What I will say is salmonella is zoonotic, which zoonotic means that it can be transmitted from animals to humans. And really, salmonella, its biggest issue is for people who are young or old, and that's because of your immune system. Young children and adults, their immune systems are not fully competent, either because they're elderly or because it's not fully developed as a child. And so that's something to be careful. When you're handling things, wear gloves, wash your hands, use good hygiene. Just like with COVID, wash your hands.
Right.
It's amazing what a little soap and water will do for you for a lot of pathogens.
So let's take this. We've kind of talked about, the smaller songbirds. Let's take more of your raptors. Yeah, your raptors, owls. Tell me what you're involved with more of those.
Like you said, I'm involved with pretty much every facet of the wildlife division. We have a great program in non-game. Kate Slankard has been working on raptors and a toxicology project. Essentially, if you didn't know, there's a real problem right now with rodenticides. And this second generation of rodenticides is basically causing secondary poisoning in raptors. So those are birds of prey. So like great horned owls, barn owls, red-shouldered hawks, even bald eagles. So like if you put out some pest control, the rodent eats it, they don't necessarily die right away, and then they're weak and they're stumbling around, and it looks like pretty yummy, like easy prey for a bird, and they don't realize that this animal is sick, and then they end up getting rodenticide poisoning, and it can be fatal. It is, if it's not caught right away and treated, it can be fatal. It's basically an anticoagulant, so they die of bleeding out because you can't clot, which is really a bummer. And nobody wants to do that. So like what I would say is there's really rodenticide, but there are alternatives. Trapping is the best, like trap your rodents. There's rat zappers, which are the electrocution ones. The cheap solution is a 5-gallon bucket traps. If you just Google that, it works very well. So yeah, raptors are a big one. I would say in the world of non-game, the other big ones are the herpafauna, which is reptiles, amphibians. Back in 2016, 2018, they did a statewide health assessment, and we were basically looking for chytrid, B cell, and rhinoviruses. There's another study going on at UK that is doing snake fungal disease. So with snake fungal disease, we know it's here. We just don't know the impact it has on the population. And this is a recurring theme. Like sometimes we know there's a disease, but we don't know what it's doing to the population because we don't have enough data about the population. The real thing with the B cell, that is like a fungus of salamanders. It's foreign, not in the United States, but we want a surveillance for it because if it's here, we want to know about it. We want to catch it early. And the concerns are that it could be imported if people are illegally bringing in reptiles and amphibians. That's really how chytrid may have gotten here in the first place, which is that nasty one that has killed a lot of frogs. And I bring up frogs. Most people are like, frogs. They are ecosystem indicators. Like if animals aren't doing well, alarms should be going off because that means the ecosystem is not doing well. And like that One Health idea, we rely on the environment. And if you don't have a good environment, that's going to impact us too. So that's why like it's really important to pay attention to some of these things that are happening to reptiles and amphibians because they kind of give us an indication of how the whole health of this ecosystem is doing. And the last,
so I was going to say, then you also have, bats, and a lot of our viewers, they're aware of bats and white nose. I mean, we can talk for days just on that one and just briefly just kind of touch on what you collaborate with our diversity folks, and then we'll kind of transition from here.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, most people have already heard about white nose. Basically, it has caused devastating population declines, 80 to 90% in little brown bats. Currently, the populations have seemed to stabilize, which is good. We're detecting it far less than we used to in terms of the actual fungus being present. We do still see signs of disease. So you can tell on bats, their wing membranes may have scarring on them, so we can tell that they were infected at one point. Okay. So we're doing active monitoring for that. And like I said, the population seems to be stabilizing. The real reason why I bring up white nose is because that has a devastating impact on the population. We are terrified of what could happen if COVID could have an impact, and we don't know that yet. But this is that precautionary principle where you take a step back and be like, we need to be extra cautious because they're already vulnerable. We take precautions, like you need to be wearing PPE. So people are wearing N95s to go into a cave, and they're socially distancing. You know what I mean? Like they're not even touching the bats, which is what they used to do to read band numbers. So we're being very careful in protecting this valuable resource.
And I mean, yeah, bats, we know the importance of bats as far as, how many insects they eat. And it's just, this is something that a lot of people have, heard about, wondered about. It seems like, there's a headline about white nose syndrome every couple of weeks. I mean, there's just so much energy trying to, put toward this effort to figure out what's going on. But real quick, one of the things that Chrissy, I know has been on your radar, and it was on your radar fairly quickly, was a hemorrhagic disease with rabbits. And I was wondering if you could kind of explain what that is, and if we have it here in Kentucky, what are we doing to keep it out of Kentucky? But just kind of give us an overview of that, if you would.
Certainly, and I will change the slide. I tried very hard not to put gross disease pictures, but I had to include one. It's just a bloody nose. I'm giving everybody fair warning. So there's a little blood. Obviously with a hemorrhagic disease, there's going to be blood. This is the one that's been on my radar and is very concerning. So rapid hemorrhagic disease virus is a foreign animal disease, which means it causes significant economic impact, and that it could cause social harm. Humans cannot get this. It only infects rabbits, but it has a significantly high mortality rate, like upwards of 50% or more. It basically got introduced in the Southwest last March, and it has spread, I would say, like wildfire, because it is in It's now out there. I have a map. It's on the USDA website. I was going to try and bring it up, but it's like an
So I was going to say, so when you say Southwest, you mean like the southwestern part of the United States, not
Yeah.
Southwest
Oh, yeah.
Kentucky,
Sorry.
right?
It is
Right.
not in Kentucky. And that's why when I say number one goal, prevention, we don't, with that disease triangle, the pathogen's not here. We have the host and we have the environment. So let's keep that pathogen out. And the way to do that is to not bring rabbits here. So don't bring live ones and don't bring dead ones. If you were going to do it, you need to clean your rabbit. If you go out of state for hunting per se, you would clean it and basically skin it and eviscerate it. So that way you're only bringing back the meat because it is so contagious. And it's environmentally hardy. It can survive for months in the environment, and that's and it can be on your clothes. If you have domestic rabbits, you could spread it to your rabbits in your pen. Like say you went out of state, hunted in a state where it's endemic, and then you come back, you could have it on your clothes. That's how hardy this thing is. So right now, in terms of surveillance, I'm just asking anyone if they see a dead rabbit, and I put the kind of defining what a suspicious mortality would include. If you're seeing multiple dead rabbits, let me know and report. Not handle.
Right.
This is one I want to stress for this disease because there is another disease called tularemia, which humans can get. It is here in Kentucky. It is endemic, which remember it means it's here and occurs at a common frequency. So we don't, because tularemia makes rabbits die abruptly. So does this disease. It could be confused. And until we do a test, I don't know. So that's why I'm like, do not handle, just report.
Well, let's take it from, a disease we're concerned about and looking for, but we've not found it here, to touch on a few game animals that we know we have the disease or know some assessments we're looking at. So one that particularly comes to mind is ruffed grouse and West Nile virus. I know it's a lot for our grouse hunters or grouse enthusiasts. You hear a lot about West Nile. Tell me what you're involved with and what you're doing there.
Yeah, so this is really exciting. This is this past summer we did some mosquito surveillance. So this was our first year doing mosquito surveillance in ruffed grouse habitat, and this is kind of a follow-up to a study that Pennsylvania did. So Pennsylvania did a study, and they have found that they suspect that ruffed grouse population declines may be attributed to West Nile virus infections. And so some of the little background behind this was there was an experimental infection trial done at SCWDS, which is the Southeastern Cooperative of Wildlife Disease Studies, which we are a member of. And they did an infection trial and they demonstrated that it did cause mortality in about 40% of the birds, which is extremely high. If you think about COVID being a 3% mortality, 40% is a lot. So this is really, I'm waiting on the results. They should be back soon. So what we're starting with is just the basis. Like, let's look and see if we can find the virus. I don't know if that's having an impact on our grouse because that's the next step. First, we have to find the virus. So that's what surveillance is. So we are actively doing surveillance for arboviruses, which are basically an arthropod vector, which means a biting insect, which is a mosquito. So I'm looking for mosquito viruses.
So you talked about surveillance. I think you're next to bobwhite quail and turkeys. What we're going for here is just active surveillance, looking for different things. So touch on that real quickly, and then we'll move on.
We'll keep it moving. I'll start talking faster. That northerner will come out. So bobwhite quail, we're doing a health assessment. So basically, we did a hunter harvested study recently, but the issue is they're collected in the winter. There's not a lot of parasites in the winter, so we didn't really get a good picture. So I took some blood samples from live birds. They are completely fine. They are safe. They are released. And I will do some testing to see if they have any parasites in the summer when we have a lot of parasites on the landscape. So I'm working with folks at Lincoln Memorial, which is down in Tennessee, to do that project. We're also going to do a wild turkey health assessment, and that's kind of up and coming. Right now, we're just asking for hunters, or if you find a dead turkey in the woods, let me know. I'm looking for any turkeys that have these kind of wart-like lesions on them. And if you give me a call your local biologist, we'll take it and we'll get it tested.
Okay.
Oh, and I should mention, if you're seeing wart-like lesions, generally speaking, that those viruses are not contagious to humans. But like I said, several of these have had multiple infections. And if it's a sick animal, we don't recommend sick animals.
So obviously, wild turkey for our viewers who are hunters, that's a season that's coming up shortly. We're just coming out of deer and elk seasons, but we had mentioned CWD a little earlier, but you were going to talk a little bit about EHD, or HD is what we call it, and just maybe distinguish between the two, because sometimes people can get them mixed up.
Yeah, certainly. So I kind of have a big game slide here, and I can start with the deer stuff. So hemorrhagic disease, it's caused by two different viruses, which can be confusing because a lot of people refer to it as blue tongue, but it's most likely it's an epizootic hemorrhagic disease virus. And epizootic is the animal version of epidemic. So that just means that we expect it to do these like cyclic peaks. So it's not occurring like every single year like an endemic disease. It is known to have these epidemics, which is exactly what it does here in Kentucky. And it's not having significant population level impacts. It is very different from chronic wasting disease, which is an always fatal disease. So the big difference here is there are deer who get this hemorrhagic disease and survive, and they produce antibodies, and they can pass those antibodies to their young. And that's part of why we see this cyclic nature, is because there's protective antibodies in a herd. Unlike chronic wasting disease, there are no antibodies, there is no protection, it is fatal. It is not here in Kentucky, and we do not want it here in Kentucky. It is just across the border in Tennessee, which is very concerning. And it's why my number one priority is prevention. And that prevention means not bringing carcasses back, don't import. It is so important because these prions are environmentally hardy. And when I say that, it means they're resistant to being destroyed. They just hang out for years.
So I was going to say EHD, CWD, this is very similar to our discussion on white nose and bats. We can talk days and lots and lots of stuff about those diseases. We really just kind of
don't show. There's so much to talk about with chronic wasting disease. I did want to show you guys a short, quick video. I know I'm going over time, so I will be quick. Did have our first case of canine distemper in a black bear, which is slightly concerning. We don't really know what that means from a population level. Can you guys see the video? This bear circled around. So it's a neurologic disease. It just circles around this house in a path, around and around, and doesn't stop. It keeps coming. It's got one path that's worn in. So it was euthanized and it was tested, and it came back as canine distemper. So this is our first case of canine distemper in a bear. This is something to look out for. So I will pause that as it goes on for a little bit. But
so that's something if you were to see, a bear behaving that way, certainly give us a call as quickly as possible.
Exactly. Acting strange, a bear circling. Did you see how close those people were? The bear didn't care. That's not normal behavior. A bear should care if a person's standing right next to him. And so that's a big sign. The other thing we're looking for in bears is mange. In different parts of the range, in more northern parts of the range, we know that it has been detected now in Virginia, which is bordering us. So that is concerning. So we are doing passive surveillance, which means if we see something that looks possible like mange, we'll scrape it and we'll test it for mites. That's a big game scenario. I'll skip over elk. We can always talk about that at another time as well.
Yep. So let's kind of transition into some of our more topic of the day, if you will. Let's talk non-native species and kind of wild pigs and some of that fun stuff for us.
Yeah, so I'll just briefly mention the pig diseases that we're concerned about. As you know, they are invasive species. They've been introduced and they are not good. And Terry's going to go into great detail about this. So I'll only mention the diseases. The ones that we look for are pseudorabies. It is related to rabies. It only has the name pseudorabies because In newborn pigs, it can cause central nervous issues, which makes them neurologic. Swine brucellosis, classic swine fever. And the big one here that we are concerned about is African swine fever. It is not here, foreign animal disease, and USDA wants us to report if you are finding any sick or dead feral swine, and not something that was roadkill or you know how it died. But if you find something that looks sick or dead and it's unknown why it died, they do want you to report that.
So Chrissy, I think you've given us a huge background of all the different places that you're involved with and your collaboration. You know, we took a really fast-paced trip around what you deal with on a day-to-day basis. You know, one thing that we want to make sure that folks know is we have a fantastic amount of resources available for you to learn more on our website. So if you go to fw.ky.gov and then you just search wildlife diseases, you will find page after page of a review of all the different diseases that we talked about, where you can find more information, what that looks like. And if it's something that you're interested in, you can really go down that the investigation stage and learn more about it. But I think ultimately what we want people to know is that we're involved with lots of different species, lots of different diseases, but we're doing our due diligence to make sure we manage everything correctly. If you see a sick animal, we make sure, please call us. Don't touch it. Don't mess with it. Just call us so we can get out there and collect an animal, see what's going on.
The only thing I would mention, and this is the stuff that I worked most with Terry on, is so I talked about the diseases and the surveillance component. The other part, which is more what Terry does, is the permitting, and we do permits and regs to prevent disease introductions. And one of the big ones is rabies. That is more public health realm. So Dr. Giesberg, Kelly Giesberg, if you have a wild animal bite or a dog bite, public health is who you want to contact. Certainly, if there are wild animals that are acting strange and no human exposure involved, you should be calling us. I hope I made that. Does that distinction clear to you guys?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I could talk forever about diseases.
We feel your passion. We greatly appreciate all the work that you do, and it comes out in your excitement for it. And thank you very much. One thing we'll say, we'll have you back on at the end of the episode. So our folks that are listening and watching, please ask your questions, type those in the chat function, and we'll try to get to those here in a little bit. And Dr. Casey, we'll see you soon. And if Terry's out there, we'll have her jump on and join us now.
Hey guys.
Hi there. How are you?
Good. I'm excited to talk about wild pigs tonight.
Good. I know it's something you spend a lot of time on. You know, some of our viewers may have seen you on Kentucky Afield segments, wild pig segments. So we're honored to have you here tonight, just to talk about your work and about wild pigs in general. So for those, wild pigs is it's a term that we use, but for everybody out there, can you kind of let's kick things off? Kind of similar to what we did with Chrissy, just generally, what is a wild pig and what problems do they create? Kind of use that as an entry point.
Okay. Yeah. Wild pigs are basically a highly destructive invasive species. They are throughout the Southeast U.S. They are in Kentucky. We have 5 or 6 populations, but they're not native to Kentucky. They're not native to the U.S. And they're actually the perfect invasive species because they have very highly intelligent. They have a high reproductive rate. They can live anywhere. They can eat anything, and they have no natural predators. It makes them the perfect invasive species. Many people refer to them as the Asian carp of the forest, actually. Nice. They were imported in the 1500s for food source by early Europeans, our pigs in Kentucky and most of the Southeast are actually considered hybrids. They are a hybrid between the Eurasian boar, like from Russia, and a domestic pig. So pigs have, Gabe, I think, has a picture. So you've got domestic pigs, you've got your Eurasian boar, and you've got a mixture of these in the middle with the hybrid. So they can look like anything, much like dogs. All of these pigs in the picture are the same species, so Scrofa, but much like dogs, they can look very different. They can look like an Eurasian boar with this grizzled coat color, long, lean snout, taller, or they can just look like your regular farm pig. But anyway, most of our pigs are hybrids. Basically, they're either black or brown. They're about 75 to 250 pounds, and piglets can be any color as well. But really, one of the things about piglets is a lot of them are born striped. They've got this really pretty striped color, and that's indicative of that Eurasian boar ancestry. And most of our piglets that we see on the landscape are striped. So
I was going to have to say, me personally, I dabble in the farm world a little bit, and I've had a few pigs on my farm over the years. I know those suckers in a domestic pig, that can cause a lot of damage just in my pen. So that's kind of one of the things that people think about in wild hogs is the damage that they can create. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Oh yeah. So like they eat almost anything. So they do. One of the things affecting native wildlife is they outcompete our native wildlife for food, especially fond of acorns. So they will outcompete our native deer and turkey in the for acorns in that important fall food source. And otherwise, deer and turkey leave the area when pigs show up. They just can't compete. They don't even stick around. They just leave. So that causes problems for our sportsmen and sportswomen that are trying to hunt. So they also prey on a lot of our small animals or small mammals. They prey on our reptiles and amphibians. Like during amphibian breeding season, they're really hard on our frogs, our salamanders. They're really hard on our ground nesting birds. They will eat chicks. They will destroy nests, eat eggs. They destroy forests. So they're rooting and they're wallowing, destroys forests. They are really hard on crops. I know we have a couple pictures. They destroy hay fields, they destroy crops, food plots. So this picture is a hay field and it looks like it's just been completely tilled up. And so that was awful damage. And then we have this crop field. This was my first field visit as the wild pig biologist in 2016. Went to this, got a Facebook message of pig damage, showed up, and the whole corn crop was destroyed by one sounder of pigs. Now, sounder, I'm not trying to get too technical. A sounder is basically a family group of pigs, all adult females, mom, sisters, aunts, grandma, all of them together, and all their piglets. The males are solitary. They generally leave this sounder about 18 months old to go out off and be grown-ups. So, but yeah, so that crop damage is really, really hard on our farmers. So that's not good.
I was going to say one thing, Terry. When this picture, we'll go back to it. Crops. How can you tell that this is pig damage? I mean, to me, the novice here, I don't see any wallows or dirt, or unlike the previous one that it was obviously been rooting there. Tell me about the tracks. What do they look like? How does that signify to you that that's pigs in there?
Okay. Well, a lot of people experience like raccoon damage from corn, and raccoons are going to climb the stalk and break it off up. They're going to leave 2 to 3 feet of that stalk, and they're going to break that off. So basically they can climb that stalk and pull the corn off. And deer are going to just pull the corn. I mean, sometimes they'll tear it up, but a deer can't do this much damage. Deer don't live in groups. This is definitely pigs. They come in and they just plow it down. They eat everything, but basically one of the things, the extent of the damage and then the fact that the whole plant is flattened is indicative of pigs. And their tracks are very similar to white-tailed deer tracks, so it's really hard to differentiate between the two. But I think you do have a picture showing that deer tracks are a little more spear-shaped. Hog tracks are a little wider, a little more oblong. And then if you look at the dew claws, sometimes you can see the dew claws in the print. The The dew claws will be on the outside, angled out for hogs, and they'll be directly behind the print with deer. So, yeah, so crop damage is really bad, and forest damage is bad. I mean, they're just bad for everything, and they're really bad on water quality. So they'll come in to a beautiful stream or pond or whatever and just destroy it.
One of the things you and I have talked about is just what prolific breeders these pigs are, and just how quickly this can get out of control. But it's that damage, but it's also a disease threat, correct? I mean, these pigs are, was it more than 40 diseases and parasites that
Yeah. And Chrissy was talking about a couple of them, but yeah, pigs have up to 45 diseases and parasites, some of which can be transmitted to humans, livestock, pets, and our native wildlife. I mean, if brucellosis or pseudorabies get into our domestic pigs, that will shut our pork industry down in Kentucky. I mean, as far as Department Ag and the testing and everything that we do for our domestic pigs, we are pseudorabies free, we are swine brucellosis free in those domestic herds, but our wild pigs are not pseudorabies free, they're not swine brucellosis free. So we definitely need to get them off the landscape, not only to protect our native wildlife, which is one of my focuses, but it's to protect our pork producers. We can't let this disease transmit from our wild pigs to our domestic pigs.
So we've talked a little bit about, the wild pig, but we've not really touched on how did they get here? They're not native, they're not a domestic pig. So what do we know about their introduction as they moved across the landscape? Can you elaborate on that a little bit, Terry?
Yeah, wild pigs in our populations are not the result of natural expansion. They didn't walk here. They are the result of illegal release. Misguided hunters wanting to create a new hunting opportunity brought them in via truck and trailer in the middle of the night and dumped them out. I mean, wild pig hunting's fun. So there's no, deer and turkey season are not all year. So, what to do when there's no deer and turkey season. But the problem with that is that you can't have a healthy deer and turkey population and wild pigs. I mean, You just can't. So at the expense of our deer, wild pigs are here at the expense of our deer and turkey.
So in preparing for tonight, I like to go back through old Kentucky Afield magazine articles, and there's been several articles written in that magazine about wild pigs, but I found a couple of different descriptions that really just kind of, to me, painted a picture of what these animals can do. But there's a line in there: if you imagine the forest floor as a carpet, then wild pigs are vacuum cleaners. It's not just what they eat, but how they eat. Unlike wild, white-tailed deer, bears, turkeys, or rabbits, feral pigs leave a swath of destruction when they feed because of their aggressive rooting behavior. So how do we get them off the landscape? If they're this bad, how do we remove them? What is your strategy? We talked about sounders, and I think it may come up, in your answer to this question. But how do we go about this, and who do you work with?
I have got the best team. I work with USDA Wildlife Services. Their biologists are a partner with us to actually trap pigs. We trap pigs for free for anyone having damage. You just give us a call and we will come out and take care of it. Basically, trapping is the most effective way to eradicate pigs. It allows us to capture that entire sounder. Now, you remember that pigs are the smartest animal in the woods. So we used to have different types of traps that used trip wires or rooting sticks. The pigs would come in and trip a wire and the door would shut. But that would leave some of the pigs on the outside of the trap. Those pigs learned very quickly to be afraid of traps. When they saw their family get trapped, they were gone. So they became trap shy, they became educated. And I mean, these traps were all we had. That was the best we could do, and we were doing a good job. but now we have traps that we use remote activated doors that close and real-time cameras that we can watch. We can learn how many pigs are in this sounder. If there are 20 pigs in this sounder, we wait for 20 pigs to go in that trap. We wait for all of them, then we drop the door. So we have been very successful with that, and we have eradicated several populations of pigs just by this science-based trapping program that we have.
So one thing I don't think we touched on is, I think you've got pigs. What do you do?
Yeah, well, we have a new website and a new reporting button and a new reporting system. If you have pigs, or you see pigs on the landscape, or you think you have pig damage, you can go to our website at fw.ky.gov, and you can type in pigs in the search bar, and that'll pop up with our new wild pig page. And there's a little red button that says report, and you click on that button, and that report button sends me an email. So basically you hit report and I get an email. So it's right down a little farther, right there. That report button sends an email to me, and then my team will get in touch with you, and we will work out a plan to come out and determine what's going on your property, and see if we can help remove pigs. You can also call the 800 number, the 800-858-1549, as usual, and they will, those calls will come to me as well. So, but now we do have a new reporting option.
So, we are the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and a lot of the things that we do, where, part of our mission is to promote hunting, fishing, and all of that. We take a little bit different approach with pigs on that hand. So can you touch on kind of our methods and what we want our landowners and our hunters to do when it comes to wild pigs?
Oh, yeah. So we have a media campaign. We just started about a year ago, and I've worked with Kevin on this and worked with you guys. And our media campaign is Report, Don't Shoot. And I know that sounds crazy when we rely on our sportsmen and sportswomen to help us with conservation issues. When we have high deer densities, we ask our hunters to shoot more does. I mean, help us with these issues. So now we're asking them not to shoot pigs. So I know it sounds crazy, but I do have a reason for that. So let me explain about that. So like we talked about, wild pigs are the smartest animal in the forest. So you shoot into a sounder of 20 pigs and you shoot 2 of them, and 18 run off. They scatter, they leave the area, they become nocturnal, and now they're on to you. So they're not going to go around humans, and we can't find them. So 6 months later, we find these 18 pigs, and 9 of them, have had a litter of piglets. So we've got this pigs that are now instead of 18, we've got 50 or 60, and they've been educated to be afraid of humans. So they're going to be much harder to trap now. So basically, we think that if you don't shoot at them, don't educate them, let us come in and trap them, then we can remove them from the property.
And that's been a very adaptive approach that we've taken as an agency, right? So, Kevin alluded to Kentucky Afield magazines and articles, and you hear people on the Outdoor Channel hunting pigs, but we've kind of learned and progressed and adapted through time. Can you touch on that just a little bit?
Yes, Kentucky,
where we're at today.
Yeah. So and we've had so like in some other states, I mean, we don't have as many pigs as our southern neighbors. So we are able to fully eradicate wild pigs with our trapping. We really believe we can get them all. Because one, we've caught on, we've learned from the states to the south how to handle this. I'm part of the National Wild Pig Task Force, the Southeastern Wildlife Pig Task Force, several task forces throughout the nation that we work together to collaborate on these pig issues. So they have a high reproductive rate, and you have to actually remove 70% of the population annually to get the population to start declining.
Wow.
And hunting generally removes 30%. So it's just hunting's not going to work because of that high reproduction.
So you had mentioned, I think, right off the bat, there's five populations in the state right now.
Yeah, five or six. We do have, pigs pop up in other areas that sometimes we can very quickly squash a new population to where it doesn't start. When the public calls us and lets us know they see pigs, that's the best thing. We can get in there quickly and remove 5 pigs before they turn into 500.
And that process can happen really fast. I mean, in my research, they can be really young and also start reproducing and carrying piglets, and they have a very high litter rate. And it's not uncommon for a sow to have a dozen, 15 piglets. Oh yeah. So I think our litter numbers are a little smaller than our southern states, but a female can reproduce at 6 months old and produce 2 litters a year, usually 3 to 8 piglets. But I have seen a pig that was nursing 5 piglets, and she was pregnant with 5 more. And I was like, what are you going to do with these? You're still nursing the first litter. So I actually felt sorry for her. She was going to have 10 babies, but no, but really, it was just amazing. It was amazing that I thought, how in the world is she, I would have expected her first litter to be a lot older than that. And she was already pregnant again.
Terry, how big can an adult or a mature wild pig grow to be? And is it something like, if you're out in the woods and I would think it's going to be pretty rare that you would see one. They're probably pretty skittish. But is there anything, you should be afraid of or take action or do or anything like that? So,
okay. Well, your first question, wild pigs can get, generally speaking, about 200, 250 pounds in Kentucky. Our domestic pigs actually get bigger. So, because they were bred to be bigger, they were bred for more meat. So some of them, we've had loose domestic pigs that have become feral, and some of them weigh 400 pounds. And they've had higher nutrition. Your domestic pigs have higher nutrition, reduced activity. Our Eurasian boar and our hybrids, they are longer and leaner, and so they'll be a little bit smaller. They'll be taller, but they'll be much thinner and smaller. And as far as wild pigs being dangerous, and if we have to worry in the woods, every wild animal is dangerous. However, like all the other wild animals, they're way more afraid of us than we are them. And they have excellent hearing and excellent senses. So they're going to hear us and smell us before we even see them, and they're going to run away. So I have come up on pigs once or twice, and they run. So unless you're threatening them and they're cornered, they're not out to attack you. They're not waiting in the woods to jump out and attack you. I mean, they're just wild animals that are going to run away.
So as we wrap up kind of our conversations on wild pigs, anything else you want to kind of get across to our viewers, things that we left off that you really want to stress to everybody?
I would like to say we are winning the fight on wild pigs. We are seeing a reduction in numbers, and we are one of the only states in the Southeast that actually is being successful at reducing pigs. So that's something to be really excited about. And that's due to our strong partnerships. That's due to our scientific adaptive management plan and our trapping. And mostly it's due to the public. The main thing I need the public to do is to report sightings. And the only way I've been successful at eliminating populations is because the public has been so wonderful to work with. They've called me, they've stopped me in the store, they've Facebooked me, they've reported with our report button to tell me where the pigs are and that they've seen them. So we really do depend on on the public to help us win this battle. And like I said, that report button is there, fw.ky.gov, and click on the search bar and type in pigs for anything. So report wild pig sightings, but you can also report illegal release or illegal possession there as well.
Terry, I know you mentioned, you know, the partners and the help that you get from the public. You also deserve a lot of credit for what we've seen in the state. You're dedicated. I've seen it firsthand. You care a lot about this issue and you're committed to it. So thank you.
Well, thank you guys. I really have enjoyed it. It's a very challenging job. I mean, pigs are really smart and it's really challenging, but I think we're going to win this. So thank you.
So.
Well, let's bring Chrissy back on if we don't care. We do have a few questions. We'll try to answer those from our viewers before we wrap up here. So first question, I think is going to be more disease related. So any of the panel would like to take it. What are the worst areas in the state for disease? Some of the areas, if you regionally focus, I think that's going to be kind of a broad question to answer, but you know, Chrissy, you're pretty much working all across the state. Anywhere stick out to you?
No like county specifically. I mean, we're doing surveillance statewide for a variety of stuff, all the things that I mentioned. I mean, if they were talking about the salmonella, I mean, that looks like it's statewide right now. I mean, that's really just about hygiene in your bird feeders. In terms of other diseases, I mean, it's the nature of disease. It pops up, but that's why we do surveillance to figure out where it's at.
Okay. So I think this would, the next one really applies to all of us. When I go hunting, do I need to worry about anything? You know, we talked a little bit about ticks, but I guess really all three of us, if you want to kind of give some technical guidance on what you think is best for when you go afield.
Oh, I'll go.
You're the tick expert.
It's quiet.
Yeah.
So
You're the tick expert, Chrissy.
I was waiting on you to answer that. I was like,
oh, well, I thought we were all answering it. To me, for invasives, ticks, the Asian longhorn tick that I didn't get to mention is the one that we're looking for. It's a nasty little tick that is not native to the U.S. It was introduced in New Jersey and has spread since there. We had a detection that was retroactively, so our earliest detection is from 2017 on a black bear. And then we had another detection on an elk. The reason we care about this tick is because it's a weird one. It can reproduce asexually, which means it doesn't need a male partner and it can explode like exponentially in terms of populations. And it's really bad because it's not like, you know, like you find a tick and it's like one or two on you. This tick likes to infest animals and like literally coats them in ticks. So they can become anemic and die from that. Or they can pass some diseases. They're potential vectors, which is just meaning like a transmission. They can transmit pathogens.
Okay.
So,
Terry, for you, what any recommendations when you go afield for the things that you're involved with?
well, definitely wear gloves when you harvest animals. You know, that's the biggest disease, I think, concern I know with pigs, like other things, is you can catch anything from the blood or reproductive tissues or anything when you're harvesting an animal.
Kevin?
So for me, you know, when I'm going afield, it's not necessarily, you know, I'm worried about ticks, so I treat my clothing with permethrin or some sort of a spray, and I forget what the percentage is on if you use like an off or some sort of spray like that. But you know, I'm really concerned about ticks. You know, obviously they can make you really sick. So that's something to think about as the weather starts warming up. You know, when you're going out or just taking a stroll, taking a hike, stay mindful of that. But for me, I'm also, I guess I may get it from my dad. I'm a little clumsy, and you know, when I go out, so I always like make sure, you know, it's a good practice to have a emergency kit, a small emergency kit with you. But to echo kind of what Terry said as well, just wear gloves if you're field dressing. Make sure you sanitize the equipment. If you're filleting fish or working up your game, that type of thing. Make sure that all that stuff's clean. So it's a lot of stuff to keep in mind, but it's always good practice to do those types of things.
I know for me, I'll echo that with the ticks as well. We didn't talk a whole lot about it, but they do carry a lot of disease that we as humans are susceptible to. But I think the thing that I want to make sure that we're aware of is that we've talked about a lot of diseases and a lot of different game animals and species, and it's a big scary world out there. But that's not the majority, and that we just a few animals, multiple different species, and we're really just highlighted all the different things that we're involved with. It's not the norm in what we do as a collective department. It is for you two folks and what you do, but as an agency, it's not. So, don't let these things be a burdensome or a worry to you as a hunter, especially if you're a consumptive hunter. So, take precautions, think about that animal, but if that animal is behaving normally, it looks normal, and that harvest process or cleaning process, you have nothing to worry about. And we're here to provide technical guidance if you have questions to answer that. So that would be my take: is let's not be afraid of things and enjoy the pastimes that we're involved with.
I would echo that. I mean, I know I'm the disease person and I get all excited about it, but it really, you take precautions and keep yourself safe and reduce your risk. I mean, I think that's what you guys were all talking about. And I will mention UK is doing a study for ticks. So if you do find yourself with the tick engorged on you and you're concerned, you can reach out to UK's public health. They are doing a study on ticks. They may accept a tick sample from you if that's your concern.
So I'd like to clarify one of our questions. We were talking about disease and where it was most widespread. That was specific to pigs. So Terry, could you elaborate on where kind of some of the hot spots are right now that you're dealing with? You don't need to be specific, but just kind of some focal areas that you're working on or collaborating with.
Focal areas is in location.
Yeah, just some region of the state where a lot of your efforts are going into right now.
Yeah, and that's funny because we have populations, it seems, in almost every region of Kentucky. We've got a couple populations in Western Kentucky. We had a population in North Central Kentucky that we recently eradicated. It took about 5 years. We removed 600 pigs from that population. So that is, as far as we know, we're still in the monitoring stage, but as far as we know, that population is gone. We have some, and in North Central Kentucky, that was an ag community. So everybody was really helpful because it was farm and ag. But we have a couple populations in Eastern Kentucky where the pigs aren't really damaging ag. It's a more forested area, so people don't see them as much. So they're harder to find on the landscape. So that one's going to be, those populations out there are going to be harder to eradicate. But really, there's no rhyme or reason. They're spread out across the state.
Well, I think that just about does us. We've kind of answered all of the questions. I'll echo Kevin and say thank you. Thank you for all that you do. Our constituents, our hunters, our anglers, our landowners, rest assured that you guys are there doing your jobs and doing it flawlessly to maintain the health of our population. So thank you for all that you do. We appreciate being on here tonight and highlighting all of your great work across the state.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Kevin, so as we kind of transition into things, a few things I want to point out before we wrap up this evening. First off, we're entering February and the ice storm right now. Our licenses are expiring here at the end of the month. So for our folks that are ready to get out, think about spring. We talked a little bit about turkeys, so that's coming up soon. You can go ahead and 2021 annual hunting or fishing license.
And you and I have talked about fishing. I don't know how many times.
Yeah, I'm so ready. I'm so cooped up, ready to get out. Those white bass are going to be running, turkeys be gobbling soon. So looking forward to that. I personally, this ice gets off, I want to get out and start beating the woods, looking for some deer sheds. So looking forward to a lot of the different things that are in the upcoming future for us. So a couple big things we want to wrap up to think about. We covered a lot of different topics tonight. A lot of, we really just scratched the surface on a lot of these different diseases. So if you're interested in finding out more, please go to our website at fw.ky.gov. You can search invasive wildlife if you'd like to find more about pigs, or if you would like to find more about wildlife disease and all the different diseases Dr. Casey referred to, search wildlife disease. As always, you can call our 1-800 number, which is 1-800-858-1549. Biggest thing, if you see a sick animal, an animal that doesn't behave right, please call us, let us inform that. That allows our staff to do what they do. And for me, in wrapping it up, pass on your hunting or fishing tradition. Take somebody this year as we transition into spring. Kevin?
Thanks, Gabe. So yeah, we really did cover a lot of ground tonight. What we're finding with our conservation conversations is that we go over time, and that's not a bad thing. The material is very helpful. I hope the viewers are enjoying this. So we've got one more installment planned for you this month, and we're going to keep this theme of threats facing fish and wildlife. To those watching tonight, we hope you enjoyed the discussion. And we really appreciate you tuning in. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button at the top right corner of the YouTube page, and then select the bell, and you'll get all the notifications of new content from the Department of Fish and Wildlife. We'll be back again in 2 weeks from tonight for our next installment of Conservation Conversations, as we discuss threats related to conservation in Kentucky. Our topic on February 25th will be hunting and fishing participation trends, easy for me to say, and what the agency is doing to help preserve our hunting and fishing traditions. Thank you again to everybody who's watched tonight. Stay safe out there, especially with all this ice out there.